She was already shouting before I even stepped out of my truck. "You can't block that driveway," she yelled, pointing like she owned the street. The sun was sharp that morning, and my boots had barely hit the gravel when she pulled out her phone. I had just parked in front of my own house, the same one I'd paid off last year. But according to her, it was community property. Her name was Linda, but everyone around called her the HOA Queen. She loved rules that didn't exist, and she loved breaking real ones even more. I told her calmly, "Ma'am, this is my driveway." She laughed, that kind of fake laugh people use when they think you're beneath them. "Not according to the HOA. You can't park construction trucks here," she said, waving a paper like it was the Constitution. But that notice had no logo, no signature, nothing. Just her handwriting and the word violation. Before I could reply, she turned to her phone and said loud enough for the whole street to hear, "I'm calling the cops. He's trespassing and refusing to move his vehicle." Neighbors peeked through blinds. Some even stepped outside. I stood there, trying not to lose my temper. If there's one thing the military teaches you, it's control. When the sirens came closer, she smirked. "You're in trouble now," she whispered. Two men stepped out of a black SUV, wearing tactical vests with no department name. Fake badges gleamed in the sun. That's when I knew this wasn't just a nosy neighbor moment. She'd called her own private security. I raised my hand slowly. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "Arrest him." One of the fake cops reached for his handcuffs. But before he could touch me, I smiled. "You boys really want to arrest a colonel in the United States Army?" Linda's face froze. Her fake cops hesitated. And that's when everything changed. The two fake cops looked at each other, unsure what to do next. Linda's confidence wavered for a second, but she quickly put her hands on her hips. "You're lying," she snapped. "You're no colonel. You probably made that up to scare me." I didn't argue. I just pulled out my ID wallet, the same one issued to me years ago when I was stationed overseas. The gold seal caught the light, and suddenly her face drained of color. The silence around us was sharp enough to cut through the air. "You've got 5 seconds to step off my property," I said quietly. One of the men mumbled something to Linda, but she hissed at him to stay. "He's bluffing," she said, though her voice cracked halfway through. I watched as the fake cop tried to radio someone, but all he got was static. I knew it would. My property's security system jammed unknown frequencies. Old habits from service days never die. Then, as if the universe wanted to test me, a real police cruiser turned onto the street. Blue lights bounced off the windows. Linda's relief was instant. "Finally!" "Arrest him," she shouted, pointing at me. The officer stepped out, eyes narrowing at the scene, the black SUV, the fake badges, the shaking woman pretending to be in charge. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you said a resident was trespassing?" "Yes," she barked. "He's threatening me and blocking the road." The officer looked at my truck, then back at me. I handed him my ID. He read it once, twice, then gave a small nod. "Colonel Mason, sir," he said quietly. "You live here?" I nodded. 10 years now." That's when Linda's act started to crumble. The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, those men with you, are they law enforcement?" She froze. The fake cops started backing away toward their SUV. One tried to speak, but the officer had already drawn his weapon. "Hands where I can see them!" Linda screamed. "They work for the HOA." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, there's no HOA registered for this neighborhood." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The two men were cuffed in seconds. She just stood there, trembling, her fake authority slipping through her fingers. As the cruiser lights flashed red and blue across her face, she glared at me and said, "This isn't over." I gave a small smile. "You're right," I said softly. "It's just getting started." That night, the street was quieter than usual. Even the wind sounded nervous. After the police left with the two fake officers, I expected things to settle. But Linda wasn't the kind of woman to back off. Around midnight, my motion sensors picked up movement near the gate. I looked at the monitor. There she was, sneaking across the yard with a flashlight. I stepped outside, silent, keeping my distance. She was taping something to my front door. When she turned, I caught a glimpse of the paper. It was another HOA violation. This time it said, "Eviction notice for non-compliance." She had even forged a city seal. I almost laughed. "You're out here at midnight, Linda?" I asked from the shadows. She jumped so hard she dropped the tape. "You think you're smart, huh?" she hissed. "The board's meeting tomorrow. You'll be gone by the weekend." Her voice trembled, but not from fear. She was obsessed. "Linda," I said, stepping closer, "there is no board. You made it up." She backed up, still clutching her flashlight like a weapon. "You think you're untouchable because you were in the army?" "This neighborhood has rules," she shouted. That's when my porch lights flicked on, automatic, bright enough to light the whole yard. And right under that glare, I noticed something shiny in her hand. "A key to my front door. How did you get that?" I asked quietly. She smirked. "The HOA keeps a copy of all homeowner keys. For safety." My stomach turned. That key wasn't copied. It was stolen. I didn't move. I just stared at her until she started fidgeting. "You broke into my house, didn't you?" I said, calm but low. "You went through my things." She didn't answer, just started backing toward her car. I could have called the cops again right there, but I didn't. I had a better idea. As she drove away, I walked back inside and opened the cabinet where my security hub was hidden. Every inch of my property was under video surveillance, including my living room. I replayed the footage from earlier that day, and there it was. Linda walking right through my front door while I was at work, rifling through drawers, snapping pictures of my documents. She wanted a war? Fine. But she had no idea who she'd picked a fight with. By morning, I already had everything set. The footage was copied to 3 drives, one for the police, one for my lawyer, and one tucked somewhere she'd never find. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was making sure her lies collapsed in front of everyone she tried to control. Around 10, she came storming down the street again, clipboard in hand, her face red with confidence. A few neighbors stood on their porches, pretending not to watch. "You're officially evicted," she said, waving a paper at me like she'd just won a court case. "The board voted this morning." I kept my tone easy. "Really? That's interesting," I said, pretending to study the document. "Because I just spoke to the county office. They said there's no registered HOA here." Her smile twitched. "That's because it's private," she snapped. "Private," I repeated, stepping closer. "Then maybe you can explain this." I pulled out my phone and played the security footage. Her walking into my house, opening drawers, taking pictures. The neighbors started whispering. Her hands began to shake. You can't record me without permission," she shouted. "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "It's my property. And you broke in." The same officer from yesterday arrived moments later, responding to my earlier call. He looked at the crowd forming, then at Linda. "We got your statement, ma'am," he said flatly. "But this looks bad." I handed him the flash drive. "That's all the evidence you need," I said. He plugged it into his patrol laptop, and the video started playing right there in the street. Every frame, clear, undeniable. Linda tried to talk her way out. "It's a misunderstanding. I was checking for code violations." The officer crossed his arms. "With a stolen key?" Her face went pale. The neighbors murmured louder now. People who'd once nodded to her with fake smiles were suddenly whispering the word arrest. One of them said, "She told us she worked for the city." Another added, "She fined us for planting flowers." Linda's control crumbled in real time. She dropped the clipboard and shouted, "You think this changes anything? He doesn't belong here." I looked her straight in the eye. "I fought overseas for this country. I think I belong anywhere I stand." She didn't answer. The officer stepped forward. "Linda Morris, you're under arrest for trespassing, impersonating an official, and harassment." As he read her rights, she turned to me with a glare that could burn steel. "You set me up," she whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "You just stepped into your own trap." When the cruiser drove away with her in the back seat, the neighborhood seemed to exhale for the first time in years. People were talking openly now, telling stories about the fake notices she'd handed out, the fees she'd collected, the threats she'd made if they didn't obey. It felt like light finally hitting a place that had been in shadow too long. I should have felt done with it. But something in her last words stayed with me. "You don't belong here." It wasn't just anger, it was something deeper, personal. That night, while going through the documents she had taped to my door, I found one that didn't fit. It wasn't a fake notice this time. It was a land record. My land record. And someone had been trying to change the name on it. I drove down to the county office the next morning. The clerk, an older man who'd known me for years, frowned as he pulled up my file. "That's strange," he said. "We got a transfer request 2 weeks ago, said you'd sold the property to the HOA." My stomach went cold. "There is no HOA," I said firmly. He nodded. That's what we thought, but the paperwork was signed and stamped. He slid the file across the counter. The signature at the bottom wasn't mine, but I knew whose it was. Linda had forged it. But there was another signature, too. Someone from the land office had approved it. That meant she wasn't working alone. Who processed this? I asked. The clerk hesitated. A guy named Mark Reeves. New here, came from another county. I took a picture of the document, thanked him, and walked out, my mind racing. Back home, I checked my security feed again, scanning through every clip from the last few weeks. And there it was. Linda meeting a man at night near the old community center. He handed her a folder. I zoomed in, froze the frame, and my blood ran cold. The man in the video was wearing a city badge. This wasn't about an angry neighbor anymore. It was a setup. Someone inside the county trying to steal my land. The next call I made wasn't to the police. It was to someone else. Someone who owed me a favor from my service days. "This is Mason," I said when he answered. "I've got a corruption problem. Need a quiet check on a county employee named Reeves." There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in years said, "Copy that, Colonel. You'll have a report by morning." By dawn, I had the report sitting in my inbox. My old contact didn't disappoint. He never did. The file was short but heavy. Mark Reeves wasn't just a clerk. He'd been fired from 2 other counties for misfiled land transfers, the kind that made property disappear from rightful owners and show up under shell companies. Guess who his latest partner was? A real estate developer named Creston Holdings, the same company that had been quietly buying land all around my neighborhood. It hit me all at once. Linda wasn't crazy, and she was working for them. Every fake HOA rule, every violation, every threat to push families out. It was all part of a bigger plan to scare people into leaving so Creston could scoop up cheap land. And my house, the biggest one on the street with direct access to the old creek, was the last piece they needed. I didn't get mad. Not right away. I just sat there staring at the screen, remembering how she smiled when those fake cops pulled up. She really thought she was untouchable. Around noon, a black SUV parked across from my house again. Not the same one as before. Newer, darker windows, no plates on the front. 2 men stepped out in suits. They didn't look like city workers. One of them walked up my driveway holding a folder. "Mr. Mason," he said in a practiced, polite tone. "We represent Creston Holdings. We'd like to discuss a property transfer." I folded my arms. "You mean theft?" He didn't flinch. "You've been difficult, sir, but this doesn't have to end badly. There's money on the table, and this neighborhood's going to be cleared soon anyway." I looked him straight in the eye. "You threatening a U.S. Army officer on his own property?" He gave a faint smile. "No, sir. Just business." I took a slow step closer. "Here's my business," I said, pulling out my phone. "Everything you just said is on record. And by the way, your friend Reeves, he's under federal investigation as of 15 minutes ago." That smile finally cracked. The other man muttered something and stepped back toward the SUV. "You'll regret this," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but you'll regret it first." As they drove off, I sent one text to my contact. "Push it to the feds. Full exposure." By evening, news vans were already circling the block. Headline: Fake HOA scheme linked to county corruption. Homeowners targeted. Linda's mugshot was on every channel, right next to Mark Reeves's. Creston's name was splashed all over the screen. I thought it was over. But just before midnight, I got one last message from an unknown number. "You should have taken the deal, Colonel." I didn't sleep that night. The message kept replaying in my head, and every time I looked out the window I could feel eyes on the house. Old instincts kicked in, the kind that never really leave you after combat. I disabled the porch lights, left one lamp burning inside, and sat by the window with my phone camera rolling. Around 2 in the morning, headlights appeared down the road. Same black SUV, moving slow this time, its engine low and deliberate. It stopped just short of my gate. 2 silhouettes stepped out, one tall, one shorter, both wearing dark hoodies. I hit record on the exterior cameras, then quietly walked to the door, my boots silent on the wood. They tried the gate. Locked. Then one of them pulled something from his pocket. Metal glint, too long for a key. That's when I hit the switch. Floodlights blasted across the yard, bright enough to blind a man. The taller one cursed and stumbled back. I opened the door halfway. "Didn't think I'd be up, did you?" I said. They froze. The shorter one turned to run but stopped cold when 2 cruisers rolled up behind them, sirens cutting through the silence. I'd called the sheriff an hour earlier, told him I expected visitors. "Hands where we can see them," an officer shouted. Within seconds, both men were face down on the gravel. One of them screamed, "You don't understand. It's not over." But the words meant nothing now. When they pulled off their hoods, I recognized one face immediately. Reeves. The other was Linda's brother. I stepped closer. "So this is family business now?" I asked. Reeves glared at me, eyes wild. "You ruined everything." "That land was worth millions." "Yeah," I said quietly. "And it was never yours." As they were dragged to the cars, Linda's brother shouted over his shoulder, "She'll come after you when she's out." I just smiled faintly. "Then I'll be waiting." The sheriff turned to me. "You sure you're okay, Colonel?" I nodded. "Been through worse. But I think it's time someone made sure this whole operation's buried for good." He nodded back. "Already in motion. The FBI's got the files. They'll trace every name connected to this mess." When the last cruiser left, I stood under the quiet sky, the floodlights dimming one by one. The street felt different now. Lighter, freer. I looked at my house, the flag still hanging by the porch, the gravel driveway that started all of this, and I couldn't help but laugh softly. All that chaos, all that noise, just because someone thought they could take what I built. The morning came calm, almost too calm, like the world had been reset overnight. The birds were louder, the air cleaner, the neighborhood finally at peace. Kids rode bikes down the street again the way they used to before Linda's rules and fake warnings scared everyone silent. I stood on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching a few neighbors wave. For the first time in months, they didn't look worried. They looked free. The local news van came by later that day, but I didn't give an interview. I'd already said everything that needed saying with proof. The footage, the forged papers, the fake HOA, it was all in federal hands now. Linda and Reeves were facing charges that would keep them busy for years. Creston Holdings was under investigation for land fraud in 3 counties. Justice for once didn't need a speech. It was loud all on its own. I sat down by the edge of my driveway, the same spot where it all started. I could still remember her voice echoing in my head. "You can't block that driveway." And I laughed. It wasn't just a driveway. It was my land, my home, the thing I'd worked half my life to protect. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, came over with a pie and said softly, "We didn't know who you really were." I smiled. "Didn't need to," I said. "All I ever wanted was peace." But as she walked back across the street, I looked at the small American flag planted near my mailbox, flapping gently in the breeze. Peace never came cheap. I learned that overseas, and I was reminded of it again right here, on my own soil. I picked up my phone and texted my old contact one last time. "Case closed. Appreciate the help." He replied a minute later, "Always, Colonel. You did good." I put the phone down, leaned back, and let the quiet soak in. Sometimes battles don't happen in war zones. Sometimes they happen in driveways, with fake notices and louder voices trying to steal what you love. But no one gets to take that from you. Not when you fought for it. Not when you've bled for it, and not when your name's still on the deed. I looked at the camera above the garage, the one that caught everything, and whispered to myself with a grin,